You're listening to the Mind Over Finger podcast, episode number 74.
Welcome to the Mind Over Finger podcast, discussions on mindful music making, efficient practice, and building a purposeful career. And now, your host, Dr. Renee Paul Gauthier.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 3 of the Mind Over Finger podcast. I'm so excited to be back, and I'm equally excited about the fantastic guests I have coming for you this season. As always, I'm going to have wonderful musicians talking about practice, performance, and career building. And this season, I'll be bringing in experts in all sorts of modalities that help us musicians feel better, work better, play better, and live better. So once a month, you can expect to hear about how yoga, physical therapy, EFT tapping, Alexander technique, and a bunch of other disciplines and methods can enhance our music making. And before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to announce, if you're hearing it for the first time, or remind you if you're not hearing it for the first time, that the doors are open for the next round of the Music Mastery Experience. We start on September 21st, and you guys, I'm so excited because the Music Mastery Experience is the place to be to take everything about you playing to the next level. We're going to make over how you practice, how you prepare for performances, and we're going to transform your mindset, how you approach music making, and we're going to have you experience results like never before. We had an amazing round this summer, and the participants have called the program life-changing and seen so many wins and so much transformation in their practice and performance. But time is running out, so if this sounds like something you'd like to experience and you want to get those incredible results, go to mindoverfinger.com/MME for Music Mastery Experience and book a call today so you and I can chat about making it happen for you. And I'll have more details for you at the end of the show and in the show notes, of course. But don't delay. Once again, it's mindoverfinger.com/MME to start an incredible journey to amazing practice and optimal performance. Now, to start this third season, I'm so happy to bring you two exceptional guests who are not only leading vibrant performance careers, but having a major impact bringing mindfulness to musicians. I'm really excited to have Melissa White and Elena Urioste on the show today. Melissa and Elena are violinists, yoginis, and dear friends who spend much of their lives on the road performing and who co-founded Intermission, a groundbreaking program that unites body, mind, breath, and music making through yoga and meditation. Melissa is a first prize laureate of the Sphinx competition, has received critical acclaim for solo performances with some of America's leading ensembles, including the Cleveland Orchestra, the Boston Pops, and the Atlanta, Baltimore, Colorado, Detroit, and Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestras. As a founding member of the Grammy Award-winning Harlem Quartet, she's appeared in many of the country's most prestigious venues, including Carnegie Hall, the White House, and the Kennedy Center, as well as internationally. Elena is a BBC Radio 3 New Generation artist and also a first-place laureate of the Sphinx competition. She's given acclaimed performances with major orchestras internationally, including the Philadelphia, Cleveland, and Minnesota orchestras, LA and New York Philharmonics, Boston Pops, the Chicago, National, Atlanta, Baltimore, Detroit, and Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestras, the London Philharmonic, and the multitude of others. She's performed regularly as a featured soloist and given recitals in such distinguished venues as Carnegie, Wigmore, and Weill Recital Halls, at the Kennedy Center, Concert House Berlin, and the Mondavi Center. Melissa and Elena are both active teachers within their musical careers, and they've often found themselves advising students to explore principles learned in yoga as much as those from their musical studies. And out of this realization that the two fields are inextricably linked, the idea for Intermission was born. Intermission is comprised of sessions for students, retreats for professionals, and there's an app for absolutely everyone. Their hope is that through exploring mindful movement, alignment, breath work, and self-compassion, musicians of all ages and stages can begin to unite their physical, mental, and emotional selves so that music making may become a more holistic, healthy, and joyful practice. I had such a great time speaking with Melissa and Elena about all things mindfulness and better music making through presence, and I know you'll love our conversation. Let's go to the show. Melissa White and Elena Urioste, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
We're very happy to be here.
Melissa and Elena, you're both consummate artists with performing careers, and you're also both share a passion for mindfulness and yoga that has brought you together and is positively affecting the lives of countless other artists. And for me, I have to say it's very special to have you on because discovering yoga back in 2001, I think, and deepening my practice was really the beginning of completely redefining my relationship with my instrument, the way I practice, the way I perform, and my whole musical career. So this is a very special conversation for me. I'd love to start with maybe having the two of you talk to us a little bit about you, your careers, how your path unfolded, and then we'll move on and hear a little bit about Intermission, if that works.
Sure, I'll start. So this is Melissa here. I began playing the violin when I was 6, but I come from a family of non-musicians, and I started because I saw Itzhak Perlman on Sesame Street when I was 4. I loved how his chin fit perfectly in the chin rest, so I begged when the show went off for a violin, and it took 2 years, but I finally got one. So that's how I got to start playing. Fast forward, it became the biggest part of my life, and so I went to Curtis for undergrad, and that's actually where Elena and I first met. And then I went to NEC for my master's, and it was there working on my master's with Donald Weilerstein that he asked if I had ever done yoga. And the answer was no. And in my lesson, he starts talking about how yoga would maybe help me to feel things deeper in my body as I was performing and working with my fingers up top of my violin. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. I had a friend who was going to be going to a hot yoga class. This was 2009, and I went with her. And I immediately loved in the hot room that the sequence was one that repeated everything twice. So immediately I could start to see a change, be it for better or worse. And then I also enjoyed that in the hot room, I was sweating. So there's a mental aspect of getting through the heat, doing these postures. And at the end, it felt like you would really accomplish something. So I kept going back, and the series was all over the world. So no matter where I traveled for performances, I could go into the hot room and do this set sequence. And then Elena and I crossed paths again and realized we both had really taken to it. And specifically this series of yoga. And so then we became roommates in New York, and over our dinner table, we started chatting about how beautiful it would have been if we had had this practice of mindfulness and a sense of the body in a greater way when we were teenagers, doing so many hours of practicing at summer camp and in schools. So we thought, we should start a camp for students, and this can be a part of their day. And we sketched, and we were like, yeah, but who's going to watch them at nighttime when they're supposed to be in their dorm? We don't mean to babysit. So we were like, okay, we'll start with adults. And so that's how the retreats began. And Intermission officially started in 2017. And the most beautiful part has been the community that has grown. And it's just a lovely group of people. And we're so happy to have found them, although we started Intermission together.
And then, hi, Elena here. My story of how I began playing the violin is very oddly identical to Melissa's. We were actually doing an interview much like this one in, I believe it was 2005 4. And someone asked how we had both found the violin, and she went first. She gave her story, and I was like, wait, no way. I saw that same episode of Sesame Street, and it made me want to play the violin. I also come from a family of non-musicians, so and I'm 2 years younger than Melissa, so I saw this episode when I was 2. So the story goes, I don't actually remember it personally, but my parents have told me the story enough times that it feels like I do. So I was equally inspired and started asking for a violin. They thought this was deeply strange behavior for a 2-year-old, so they had me hold off. I kept pestering them, and then finally when I was 5 years old, I started playing via the Suzuki method in my kindergarten. I was lucky enough to go to a public school in the Philadelphia area, which offered Suzuki lessons. So that's how I started playing the violin. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, so I always idolized all of the kids who went to Curtis. It was always kind of my dream to go there. I met Melissa in the lobby, actually, when I was still in high school, and I was there for a lesson or something like that. And I was like, you're Melissa, I know who you are. And I'm sure she thought I was a freak.
I actually just thought she was amazingly friendly.
But so we became close through a combination of Curtis. We went to a summer camp together called Encore. It no longer exists, but it was kind of the practice camp for a certain era. And also through the Sphinx organization, which is Detroit-based organization that diversifies classical music. That's their mission. So through a combination of those things, we started playing together. We started hanging out a lot and grew very close. And I did my graduate work at Juilliard very briefly, was living in New York. And then when Melissa moved, we started doing more playing together. We became roommates, as she said. And Intermission was just something that kind of, as she said, grew over our dinner table. And it really just stemmed from this idea of wanting to share everything that we were learning in yoga with students and colleagues. In another strange coincidence, I found hot yoga, the same practice, during the same summer that Melissa started going to classes. She was in Boston, I was in New York, so we hadn't coordinated this at all. I went for non-musical reasons. I was in a kind of sticky personal patch in my life, and I was feeling very sorry for myself. So I was like, okay, enough. I'm going to drag myself to a class. And I just became intoxicated by it. It was the first time that I felt powerful and strong and present in my body. I loved the heat. I also loved the set sequence, the opportunity to do everything twice. So yeah, you really do kind of feel that progression. And I noticed kind of by accident that going to hot yoga regularly was having an enormous impact, not only on my physical and mental health, just in everyday life, but also in my physical and mental relationship to the violin. I found that my practice was becoming more efficient. I had to drill things far fewer times, like my brain could just give a command and my fingers would obey. My muscles felt better. I could focus better. And then when it came time to perform, I had new tools in my toolbox to kind of help with my performance anxiety. Didn't cure it, but I knew that, if I breathe slowly, if I breathe deeply, if I plant my feet, if I balance my weight, all of these things will help me feel like I'm embodying the process of being on stage in a much more calm, grounded, centered way. So yeah, Intermission was our baby that we kind of hatched over our kitchen table, and has grown since there.
And I'm so excited that I have discovered you. There's a beautiful website and a great app. So I'm going to encourage all of the listeners to check it out. I'll have all the links in the show notes for sure. And I love that we have this in common too, because I loved hot yoga. And I remember vividly the class where it kind of all came together for me. I remember that morning I was practicing something, and I remember this feeling of fighting against the passage that I was practicing because it was so hard, and just feeling, this is in retrospect, of course, but feeling like physically and mentally fighting against this passage. going to the hot yoga class, and this one was not a Bikram class. It was just kind of a hot yoga sequence. But I do love the Bikram sequence, absolutely. And I agree with you. This feeling of going through the same movement twice, it's just very calming. But we're doing this warrior pose, and the instructor, to this day, I can still hear his voice. And he was talking about how, when you focus on the specific to get the pose, go deeper in the pose, and how you try to get it really aligned properly, but it feels difficult, and how you have to let go and let go and let go. And in that moment, there's something just clicked in me, or trying to get this posture aligned beautifully and feeling like stop, not fighting anymore with it and letting go. And it had such a resonance with what I had just been doing that moment. It's almost as if it all came together for me. And after that, I feel like it really opened the door to so much insight in terms of the mindset, all the things that you were just talking about, how you have more focus, and just how things feel a little bit more effortless. So that is so great. I love that we have all of these in common. So can we elaborate on that a little bit more, how you feel like music and yoga are similar in the way?
I think part of the reason we started talking about intermission, or a way to share yogic ideas and principles with other people, even if we didn't quite know what intermission was going to be yet, it stemmed from the number of times we would walk away from yoga classes, either that we'd taken together or separately, and been like, whoa, what that teacher said could so easily be applied to a specific piece, or a specific exercise or approach to the violin, or any instrument really, to music. I think there were so many parallels that we were picking up on from, really big physical ideas, such as knowing exactly what muscles needed to be engaged and what you could relax. So kind of economy of motion, economy of energy, all the way down to like little phrases that would sound so much like things past violin teachers or conductors had told us. There were just so many parallels or intersections between the two art forms. And I remember us just talking about, oh yeah, did you hear? I love that. I'm going to think about that the next time I'm, start Bruch concerto or something like that. So we were definitely picking up on a lot of wisdom from yoga teachers that were as valuable as things we'd heard from people in our musical lives.
Absolutely. And to this day, stepping onto the yoga mat, it's a moment of meeting yourself right where you are. And I don't know, as musicians particularly, I don't know how often we just sit still in silence. And if we do, or if we try to, it probably still feels a bit noisy or loud within, because we're creative. There's so much happening in our brains. It's vivid. And also lots of us are type A personalities. So we feel like we probably should be doing something else. And this might not be worth the time, or we might not have time to do this. But at the end of the day, being a musician is quite like being an athlete. We need our bodies to be physically strong, mentally strong. We need to understand that feeling our emotions is not bad. It's not a waste of time. It's actually what makes us so beautiful. I think it's what adds beauty to our art. And so taking time to do that really allows us to even start to feel stronger from within. And then as we pour out, we can pour from a place that's filled up, versus always giving, playing concerts, thinking of others, and starting to feel empty after all of that.
I was actually going to say that spending, whether it's 20 minutes sitting and breathing, meditating, if you want to call it that, or a full intense 90-minute hot yoga class, taking that time to refill your tank and invest in yourself is so important. And that's actually, I think, been one of the biggest challenges in getting Intermission as a business, out there in the world. I think a lot of musicians might overlook or undervalue this idea of making time to recharge, rejuvenate, pamper yourself.
Remember that playing an instrument is exactly that. We play. The reason we came to the instrument is because we play for the beauty of it.
Yeah, so carving out a space in each day to give back to ourselves, because our profession is to give so much to others through recordings and performances and through teaching. And if you only ever do that without taking time to refuel, we'll be empty, we'll be drained, we'll be injured, we'll be exhausted. So I think a practice like yoga, although it doesn't necessarily have to be yoga, any sort of mindful movement or silence or relaxation, it's preventative medicine as well as healing from whatever you're dealing with at the present.
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like I love what you said about meeting yourself where you are on the mat. And that is so important to do every single time in the practice room. I mean, self-compassion is at the core of what I teach, both with my students and my coaching clients and in the music mastery experience. Self-compassion is really what allows us to, I'm just going to start using that all the time now, meeting yourself where you are. And from there, assess and, build something positive, as opposed to really constantly focusing on how far you are from your ideal and seeing everything through the frustration of where you're not.
It's true. A lot of times we remind our students when we're working with students to take a moment to claim small victories. Because all the time we make to-do lists, or we come to the practice room and we think, okay, what can't we do and what should I practice, hopefully maybe one day being able to do? But once you're able to do it, it sort of flies by, and then the recognition of what you've achieved perhaps doesn't happen. But if we stop to pause and think, you know what, I did do that. I'm able to do that now. Mm-hmm. And working from there, it's a sense of empowerment and reminding yourselves that we can do hard things, and we actually do hard things all the time.
Yeah. On that note also, I think musicians are often, lots of artists are, if not competitive by nature, comparative. I think so many of us, we're always looking around, thinking how everyone else plays something better or with greater ease, or, oh, they have that gig, I don't have that gig. They make it look so easy, they have no problems, etc. And I think being in a yoga room with others and hearing enough yoga teachers say, your yoga doesn't have to look like anyone else's yoga. Your body proportions won't be the same as the person next to you. What you ate for lunch won't be the same. Everyone has a greater balance of strength versus flexibility in their body. So the same posture will look entirely different for two people, even if they're both extremely able-bodied. And it's not about what it looks like, it's about how it feels. Mm-hmm. And that's something we try, both, I know, in our own personal musical journeys, but certainly when we teach, when we share these ideas with our colleagues, we really try to impress that upon them, that both in yoga and in music, your playtime need not look like anyone else's playtime. It's about how it feels within your own body and spirit.
Yeah, this is great. What are some of your favorite tips to, bring more of this mindfulness and this, this approach of more efficiency and ease in the practice room? What are some of your favorite ways to do that?
For me, I worry I wind up sounding like a broken record, particularly to students, but I almost always take it back to the breath. Because it's, as string players, breathing mindfully is usually not part of our instrumental education. I would say the majority of string teachers focus on, we're lucky if we get past the rib cage. It's usually just the arms and the fingers and like maybe the neck, but usually only if it hurts. Mm-hmm. And obviously playing an instrument is a full body experience. What you do with your feet has every influence over how the rest of the machine is going to work. But breathing is not something we're really taught because we don't require air to make our sound. But I like to flip that idea on its head and think, okay, we don't have to breathe to play our instruments. We get to breathe to play our instruments. We have the privilege of doing it in a way that can potentially elevate our music making hugely. So my tip usually for anyone would be, before you even raise the instrument, whatever it is, to your body, before you bring it to your body, take a few moments, meet yourself where you are, notice how it feels to breathe today, and then gradually integrate the instrument into your breath. So you can spend a couple times raising and lowering it to a flow, a rhythm of your inhales and exhales. And then with the bow, depending on who's listening, you can make a flow, a yoga vinyasa, like connective series of movements, coordinating one bow per breath so that it really feels like a flow, for lack of a better term. And your sound is originating inside your body rather than, you've got your arms dangling, you've got these two pieces of equipment, you have to like put one on the other, and through some stroke of magic, it comes out not squeaking. But, if you start thinking of it as something that originates inside the body, it feels better. You're dropping further into your parasympathetic nervous system. And 11 times out of 10, it sounds better, I would say.
I love that.
It's very true. Yes, it's, I would say for me, the whole idea of practicing breathing was this cliche concept until I started to do it. And then even still for maybe the first couple years, when I would go to a yoga class and the first part of it and the last part of the class are for breathing, I would think, can we get to the movement though? Like, we're all alive in the room. I think we're breathing here. And so it's hard to really portray how powerful it is until one just does it. And then you need no words and you start to see how it creates space where you might not even know you need it, but with space, anything's possible. And I think for me, that's been the greatest thing. So between action and reaction, there can be space if we're able to cultivate it, and knowing what that means, and then having the power to be able to take a moment to let that happen or create that space is just really magical. And then when you take it to the practice room and you think, of course, there's always a list of more than 100 things probably that needs to be done, we think, in the practice room. Mm-hmm. But if you start so simply, and it can be beautiful and it's mindful, and then starting to connect from there, for me, it feels a lot less overwhelming than this checklist that I maybe need to go through. And then one more thing I would say is the idea of compassion. We oftentimes in a class will have students think a compassionate thought for someone they love, and then think a compassionate thought for themselves. And we ask them afterward, was it easier to think the thought for your loved one or for yourself? And 9 times out of 10, it's for the loved one versus themselves. And we say, but if you're able to do that for someone else, if we can start thinking to treat ourselves like we're our loved one, we are our own best friend. And that the mental game of how we speak to ourselves is also a very powerful thing. And so sometimes now in the practice room, I'll play something I love because I love it. And who knows if it's going to be the way I meant for it to sound, but playing it gives me joy. And I don't know how often we stop to do things like that because there's so much to do all the time.
Mm-hmm. And when we take the time to do that, then we become more efficient in all of the other things as well, the things that we have to do.
Absolutely.
Yes. I feel like the next question will probably bring a lot of similar answers. But Elena, at the beginning, you were mentioning how it affected performing anxiety. So can we speak about that just a little bit?
Absolutely. I was plagued by quite acute anxiety. I mean, I still am in some ways. Like I said, I just have a bigger toolbox now, I would say. I mean, I get nervous pretty much anytime I appear in front of people. And I love it. I'm a junkie. I'm like a total adrenaline junkie. So if the day I don't get nervous, I'll be concerned because it might be an indication that I no longer care, actually. But already, I pause between action and reaction, and like in that pause, try to make the choice, to convince myself that actually it's a good thing. Nerves are a good thing. For me personally, it means that I care, that I'm invested, and that I hope to have, a nice outcome, whatever that means on a given day. But for many, many years, I would say until I found my way to yoga, so 2009 or sometime thereafter, my nerves, my anxiety manifested really physically, particularly in my bow hand. I would shake. So I had terrible bow shakes so badly that for years I had to start everything up bow, which is quite impractical a lot of the time. Like I couldn't put my bow onto the string from the middle to the frog without it bouncing audibly. And I had a lot of different tips from different teachers, all of which had to do with like distributing the weight in different ways in the bow arm, in the elbow, in the hand. Not once did anyone suggest that I should inhale and exhale. So I kind of figured that out myself when I started, doing yoga with a prominent breathing practice, and noticed what an effect it had on my heart rate, on the relaxation in my hands. So definitely I make time to breathe now, and have for the last 10 plus years. Not only before I go on stage, so in my dressing room, I will usually do at least 3 to 5 minutes of a breathing exercise where I sit and I try and visualize sending air and summoning air from my belly, ribs, and chest. Another practical tip I like to practice, both on the yoga mat and in the dressing room, is lengthening my exhales so that they're longer than my inhales. So basically breathing to a pattern, inhale for 4, exhale for 6, something like that. So I definitely make time to breathe before I go on stage. But then once I get on stage, I've got there are just things at this point, they happen really quickly and I barely notice them anymore. It's part of some sort of subconscious routine, but I make sure that I can really feel the soles of my feet. Obviously not on the ground, they'll be in my shoes, but I'll try and spread my weight evenly all across my feet, spread my toes as wide as my shoes will allow, and just feel really rooted through the soles of my feet. Put a little bend in my knees, and then I'll take at least 3 deep breaths. And on stage, I try and think of breathing as much as I can, almost to the point of it not pain, but like a balloon being uncomfortably full. Like that's how full I want to be, so that then when it relaxes, I've got all this extra space, like Melissa was talking about earlier.
That was such a good, vivid image that I just did that while you're saying. I was like, oh, how does that feel? It feels great. So anyone listening, I invite you to
I'm out of breath because that sentence was so long. Right.
I'm sure everyone tried it too as they were.
Yeah, a balloon that's like nearly about to pop, but won't pop. So I always just take those couple seconds, just to feel my weight across my feet, feel my lungs at their fullest capacity, And then, exhale into my down bow, which I can now do without shaking most of the time. It doesn't mean I'm not nervous, but, my hands are a little bit more obedient. And one thing, we run into this situation a lot when we teach master classes. Students sort of feeling like it's an imposition on the audience to take 3 seconds to take some deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And we have them do it. And of course, it feels like an eternity for them if you're not used to doing it. But what it does, and we try our best to convince students of this, is not only does breathing, making time to breathe, make you as the performer feel better, it's like yawning. It makes other people around you want to do it. So I'm glad you said it. This sort of proves my point, even though I swear I didn't set Melissa up. Me talking about breathing made you want to breathe, just like if someone yawns, you yawn. So if a performer visibly is making that time to carve out a little space, a little bubble for themselves on stage by breathing, you kind of can't help but want to do it yourself. Like you realize, oh, that seems like it might be really nice, really nice and calming. So you're inviting others into your space. And isn't that what performing is all about anyway? And you start to think as a performer that it's not just about what's coming out of my instrument, but it's the whole force field of energy that I'm projecting. And I think yoga has certainly taught me a lot about that, both in musically, through breathing, and just the energy, that impalpable energy you carry around. And like anything else, that's something that needs to be practiced.
Yeah, you're like creating space not only for yourself, but for your audience to be able to receive what you're offering in a more relaxed way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it turns performing rather than performing, like a trained circus animal putting on a show for people. You start to take on the role instead of someone who's merely guiding a collective experience. So you're not kind of performing at people, but you're sharing something.
I love that. Yeah. How about you, Melissa? What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, much of what Elena said. And also, I guess I would just add, for me personally, I also went through the idea of my right hand shaking as I would get nervous and starting to try to figure out what to do about that. And breathing was absolutely helpful. Also, there came a point as I got older when I started to feel really vulnerable about the idea that I was sharing my personal emotions through my music with a room full of strangers. And I don't remember the exact moment or day or performance, but it just hit me and it felt pretty overwhelming. And then I started to be scared to do that because if I'm speaking about my emotions has never quite been my favorite thing to do. And meeting with our participants at our retreats, we have what we call share time in the evening. And share time has become this beautiful time when people, it's unscripted, so people can share whatever is on their mind. And it's been a time to see that we have more in common than not. And we're complicated and there are lots of things going on inside of us, and we share this space that we don't even know because we don't often take time to talk about it. Particularly in the musical world, when injuries come up, it's not something that is shared. It's more so something that's kept quiet or even covered up. And if you think, again, in the sports world, when someone gets injured, you hear the commentators talk about how well they're doing or what happened in the last practice and when we might see them back on the field, and you can't wait, they're looking strong, da, 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 da. And in the music world, we would like to think that it should be the same way. Wouldn't you want to see a person you enjoy performing back on the concert stage should they have gotten injured or had to go through something? And so having these share times really showed me that we do share more emotionally and physically than we don't. And so then I guess starting to embody that and starting to feel like what Elena was saying, that my yoga or my performance doesn't have to look like anyone else's. And so often I think we learn things and we think there's a right or a wrong way to play it, but really it's yours. And I wish we went back to the days when you could put on a record and you knew who it was because it was their sound. It was like someone speaking with their voice truly through an instrument. And nowadays it's almost like, who does that sound like? It could be this one. It could be these other ones. And we've sort of lost like the special quality of being unique. And I would say tapping back into that and starting to cherish that again has been a true gift and a joy to explore.
Mm. And speaking of gift and joy to explore, I was really loving what I saw on your website about these sessions that you give to younger students. It's kind of going back to your dream of having a summer camp, but in a smaller format. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that because I feel like everything that you've talked about so far is so needed in our community right now, especially with all the stress that everyone is, living. And of course, with, we've seen it coming for decades, but the scrutiny that comes with the increase of media usage, videos, all of these things. And so I feel like there's a real need and desire and a wave also going on in the musical community of going back to these values of, being unique and going back to this joy of music making. And I feel like that's, what you guys do with, of course, the retreats, but also these sessions. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the sessions.
Sure. So our sessions are for students, and the sessions came after the retreats because we felt like it still was important to start to share these ideas and these concepts with musicians as they're forming. And so sessions are held, when we're in person and not in a pandemic, at schools or at summer institutes or community music centers, whatever it may be. And so now in the virtual world, it has moved to being online. And I think, like you said, in these uncertain times, it's been a really important space to work in, because right now, really all we have is ourselves. And so music making is a communal thing, and we miss that. We miss being with people. But if we can be in community on the screen, starting to strengthen ourselves from the inside, it still has proven to be powerful and beneficial.
And on a practical, literal note, I would say our sessions vary in format from place to place, depending on how much time we're there or what the school or festival or institute is asking for. But I would say like an ideal day of sessions for us would look like the two of us co-leading a movement class, where we trade off teaching so that one of us can always be keeping an eye on the students and, doing little alignment checks and making sure everyone's staying safe. So a yoga class with breathing built in, some meditation, plenty of attention given to the wrists and arms, a lot of alignment work so we know how the whole body can stand and combat gravity optimally, some flowing, some cool down, some yummy stretches. So kind of a nice overview to yoga and movement for a musician's body. So we would have maybe a 75-minute session of that. Then we might hold an instrumental masterclass, or actually any sort of masterclasses. We worked with singers, which is really fun for us. We learned so much. But a musical masterclass where we listen to students play and approach the music. We certainly address phrasing and, normal masterclass stuff, but we have a real emphasis on breathing and alignment and making the performing experience, like we said earlier, as comfortable as possible through breathing and carving out that space both physically and emotionally. Then we might break off into private sessions where we see people one-on-one and work with specific bodily issues they might have or specific anxiety issues they might have and see what we can do to help that. And then we might close out the day with a Q&A or a share time, because it's been really interesting actually over the last few years how open students have been with us, not just about physical issues, but about mental issues as well. And we have found that yoga, one of the many, many, many cool things about it is it's such a layered practice. It starts with this sort of physical movement, and layer by layer, you kind of work inward to the breath, and then to your mental state, mental health, emotional health. So we've gone pretty deep, totally by accident, with a lot of our students who, they might have done a gentle back bend, and then 15 minutes later, they're like telling us about the last 10 years of, issues they've had with their instrument. So it can be a really powerful thing. But anyway, all of this is to say that the sessions can take on many forms, and it's basically just what the institution is looking for.
That's amazing, because so often these are things that could come in much later in one's life. I mean, you were talking about how you explored and came with what works for you in terms of, the breath exercise that you were describing and how that helps you performing. But to expose the younger students to this approach of that, they can pay attention to those things. They can have this awareness and tune in to their feelings, both physical feelings, the experience, and their emotions of music making in that way. I feel like it's so beautiful and important, because it's really kind of creating a new generation of musicians who is, they are more aware and more open, and kind of setting the stage for an environment that's going to be just more accepting, loving, compassionate, all of those things. Yeah, I love that.
That's the goal.
Yes, it's definitely our goal.
This is great. I really want to go to one of those retreats as well. I have my eye on the August 2021. So tell me about this then a little bit. What can people expect in the retreat, and what do they walk away with, you think?
Ooh, great question. Honestly, every retreat is different. It is unique. It's its own personality, because it's really a first come, first served basis. So we actually have this joke on our website. It used to say, apply, the application is here. But as musicians, everyone thought it was an audition, although no tape is required.
They're like, oh my God, am I going to get in?
So one time at share time, someone shared, I didn't know if I'd get in. There's no audition. So we simply need some information to know about you. But yeah, so it's a first come, first served basis. And luckily, it's just been a beautiful group of people. We remind ourselves, people who are willing to do yoga twice daily, come to a country house in Vermont and stay under the same roof together for a week. Communal meals, farm to table, amazing cooking. Can't be that much of an unkind person.
It's pretty self-selecting, I would say. It's quite a specific group of people.
Yes, so these are our days. So we arrive to this house, and the entire house is ours. There's a space that's set aside for yoga. We leave the yoga mats out, and then everyone's got their rooms. And so we book in the days with the yoga, morning yoga, then we have breakfast, and then during the day, people are able to do whatever it is they want to. So some practice, some are there for more of a break. So they might go out for walks. The grounds are beautiful. We're close to mountains, so you can take a hike. There are ponds, there are lakes. It's so many choices to be outdoors. And then sometimes we'll schedule activities. Everything's optional. We always remind people this is your retreat, so you choose what you want to do. And so sometimes we'll make little field trips in case people want to hang out during the day. And then we'll come back together late afternoon for the second yoga class. And then dinner will happen. There's always a delicious dessert. And so with dessert, we transition into the living room. And then it turns into share time. And what share time is really differs from day to day. It could be a game night. It could be a chat. It could be a sing-along. It could be a made-up anything. Yeah. And then usually it almost becomes like a fun, no one wants to go to sleep. So, it could go into the night, and
it's
then
basically summer camp for adults, I would say,
that's
with
what
yoga.
I call it. But then people remind me that not everyone loves summer camp. I happen to love summer camp, but But then you asked about the takeaway, and at the end of the week, it's an emotional goodbye, because we really have become like family. We've shared a hard
lot.
physical week. When you do something that's physically draining, you can't help but tap into an emotional side of yourself, and start to notice there's work to do. And the thing is, once we notice this during the week, you start to see that everyone is there for each other. Everyone is rooting for each other. And as musicians, it's a beautiful thing to see that there's space for everyone to succeed, and you want to see people be their best selves. And that's what happens. And so,
and that definitely trickles into the musical also.
Yes.
Like, we've had people, kind of do mock auditions if they had a big, audition or orchestra audition coming up, or a concerto date. People have like run through pieces, shared their composition. So the camaraderie that forms through the yoga and through the hiking and just through being together in nature, it definitely trickles into the musical aspects of our lives, which is sort of what we were hoping for when we started these retreats in an abstract sense. We didn't quite know how it would land with people, but like the musical community that has formed has just been so heartwarming. And again, it speaks to that idea of moving music into a kinder, more supportive place. So we credit the yoga with that, and just the humans that are there.
That is extended beyond the retreats. And so now we have chat groups that continue 3 years later, and claiming victories, sharing audition wins, not wins, all of the things. And so for each person, it's an individual takeaway. But I would say as a collective, the takeaway is definitely more. It's positive. It's
a
uplifting.
Family, I think.
Yeah.
Like, we've definitely formed a little retreat family, which is, it feels very cozy.
Another thing you said I love is when you said that through the physical action, a lot of emotions come. And I feel like it's the same thing for me too, where the yoga practice will untangle things in the practice room for me, and and it's also, you show up differently in the practice room. You have this awareness, this open space exactly between the stimulus that we get and our response. So this is was great. Melissa and Elena, can I ask you before I let you go, maybe a quick actionable tip that the listeners could implement today in their practice room or their musical lives, or maybe there's a challenge you would give them, maybe the breathe, the big bubble or something?
Well, I would love to share a tool that I learned at my own yoga teacher training, and I'm in development with applying it to myself, but it's definitely one that I'm quick to share with other people. So the way our practice teaches would work throughout the training is before every time we were set to teach a yoga class, either to one person or to the whole room, there was a process that would happen. So before we would teach, we had to write out 3 what they would call inquiries. So 3 basically things that we wanted to explore, not even goals. They didn't use the word goals because that felt too kind of finite and competitive with ourselves. So they were inquiries, 3 things we wanted to inquire about ourselves. And this could be, can I make my language efficient? Can I cue from the ground up? Things like that. So then you would teach the class. You would then claim 3 victories, like Melissa mentioned before. So claim 3 victories. And they could, again, be tiny, like, I ended on time, or I didn't say a lot, things like that. And then...
That's harder than it looks.
And then once we had really claimed those victories, we would write down 3 potential improvement points, or pips. So these weren't, again... in the musician fashion, 3 things we hated, or like, oh, I can't believe I messed that up, or, not criticisms. They were 3 potential improvement points. So I try and share that process with as many musicians as possible, and myself included. I really have to, remind myself to do this. And I think if the musician's process, both in the practice room and with regard to performing, could more closely resemble that, I think we'd be taking some steps in a much healthier direction. Because, claiming victories and setting inquiries rather than hard and fast goals, it doesn't make us lazy or less ambitious or less excellent. It's just a way to reframe and kind of balance out expectation versus compassion, I would say. So
Absolutely.
that would be my my little tip.
That's a great
That was so good. And you were so quick.
Oh, thanks, Pumpkin.
I've been thinking, I wanted to share one of my favorite breathing exercises, although I started to think about how much we've talked about breathing. But I wanted to maybe impress upon people that you're worth it. Sometimes I feel like we don't even think we're worth it to start. But something we teach is having a beginner's mindset. And when we come to something, we shouldn't expect to be good because we're beginning. And so as musicians, we've gotten to a point where we're probably accomplished and we can basically do things. So being a beginner is scary. We don't want to do it. We don't want to sit in that space of feeling the difficulty of whatever it is we might be doing. But really, whether it's entering a practice room, stepping onto a yoga mat, going to a retreat, whatever that may be, just knowing that you're worth the exploration and you're worth the time and the journey, and that from a beginner's mindset, so much can grow, and through that, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. This is great. I want to thank you so much for speaking with me and, taking this time to bring this awareness and shining your light onto us today. So I'm so grateful, so excited to have discovered you. I'm going to have all of the information about intermission, the retreats, the sessions, and on the in the show notes. And I'm just so happy that we've had this chance to talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really wonderful to speak with you.
Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Melissa White and Elena Urioste from Intermission. You can find more information about Intermission, Melissa and Elena by visiting intermissionsession.com. And I encourage you all to download their amazing Intermission app. And I hope to see you at one of their upcoming retreats. And I'm going to have all of this information for you in the show notes. I would love to know what your favorite takeaways from today's conversations were, so please get in touch with me. I am Mind Over Finger on both Instagram and Facebook. And why not share the podcast with your friends and tag me, Elena and Melissa, so we know you enjoyed the episode. And the last few words before I wrap this up. As I've mentioned at the beginning, the Music Mastery Experience is starting on September 21st. It's a transformational journey to loving the practice room, rocking the stage, winning the job, and taking your career to new heights. The Music Mastery Experience is a 3-month-long, highly personalized group coaching program where I'll show you how to implement mindful and effective practice techniques, make them habits, and get results. I've spent years developing my deep practice model and putting it to the test in my own career and with my students, and I'm so proud to share it with you through my Music Mastery Experience. Over the course of 12 weeks, you will learn to direct your attention and your intention. We're going to explore efficient practicing systems, performance preparation methods that give you massive results, and will overhaul your mindsets so you can experience wonderful music making day after day. You'll reach a superior level of productivity and performance. And I've created for you an environment that's going to provide you with tons of inspiration and motivation. So if you're looking to elevate your practice and performance, I think the Music Mastery experience is perfect for you. The Music Mastery experience kicks off September 21st, and there are a limited number of spots. So let's talk now to guarantee you a spot in the program and to have you take advantage of the early sign-up bonuses. So book a call with me. We'll talk about your goals, your dreams, and how the Music Mastery can get you there. You can find more information at mindoverfinger.com/mme. And of course, I'll have that link for you in the show notes. So that's it for today. Again, thank you, and à bientôt.